How dare you question my strategy? The scream didn't echo. It slammed into me, wet with spit and rage. It wasn't just a shout. It was a sonic weapon deployed in a room built for acoustics. He leaned over the podium, his face flushing a dangerous, blotchy violet under the harsh auditorium lights. "I am trying to save this quarter, and you are peddling fear," he bellowed, pointing a shaking finger at where I sat in the front row. "You are a mid-level analyst with a calculator? I am the visionary here. If you can't get on board with the acceleration protocol, then get out of my press conference." He wasn't done. He turned to the 20 journalists and the live stream cameras, grinning maniacally. "Ladies and gentlemen, excuse my lead engineer. She lacks the stomach for the future we are building. She thinks structural curing is a fixed law of physics. I say physics works for us." I didn't pack my bag. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, feeling the vibrations of the floorboards as he paced the stage. I watched him dismantle my 3 years of stress test data with a single, arrogant wave of his hand. He wanted the mega bridge finished in 12 months, not 24. He wanted the bonus attached to the early completion clause. I stood up slowly. The room was heavy with secondhand embarrassment. I looked him dead in the center of his forehead, nodded once, an acknowledgement of receipt, not submission, and walked out the side door. I left my credentials on the chair. He thought that was the end of it. He thought he had crushed me into the pavement like wet gravel. He didn't know that while he was celebrating his victory lap, the people who actually owned the money he was spending were dialing my number. Before we get into what happened when I picked up that phone and how I made him pay for every single word he screamed that day, I want to take a second to welcome you here. If you've ever had someone take credit for your work or scream at you because they were wrong and you were right, hit that like button. It helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. And if you want to see exactly how a quiet person takes down a loud giant, make sure you're subscribed. Thank you for being here. My name is Sloane. I don't have a charismatic personality. I am not the life of the party. I don't understand social cues very well, and I often forget to smile when I enter a room. I breathe heavy infrastructure. While other kids played with dolls, I was obsessing over suspension cables and aggregate ratios. To me, the world isn't made of feelings or intentions. It is made of loads and resistances. Bridges aren't just steel and concrete. They are living, breathing math. They hold millions of lives up against gravity. When I look at a span crossing a bay, I don't see a view. I see a constant, desperate war between the weight of the cars and the tensile strength of the cables. It is a beautiful, dangerous war, and I have dedicated my entire life to ensuring gravity never wins. I was the lead structural engineer for the Bayview Crossing project. It was the kind of job you work 20 years to get. It was supposed to be my masterpiece. Then came Varick. Varick was different. He came from private equity. He didn't know a kilonewton from a kilogram. He saw the bridge project not as a feat of engineering, but as a leverageable asset on a balance sheet. He didn't know the difference between tensile strength and shear force, and he didn't care. He was tall, wore suits that cost more than my father's car, and spoke in buzzwords that meant nothing but sounded expensive. He had been brought in by the board to streamline the operation. In his mind, engineering safety margins were just wasted budget, waiting to be recaptured. He only cared about the completion bonus, a payout so massive it would secure his legacy and his beach house in the Maldives. The conflict started small. A meeting here, an email there. He would ask why we were using grade 5 steel when grade 4 was cheaper. I would explain the salt air corrosion factors. He would roll his eyes and tap his pen on the glossy surface of the boardroom setup, looking at his watch. "Sloane," he would say, stretching my name out like it was a chore to pronounce. "You engineers are so quaint. You think in decades. I think in quarters. We need to move faster. Physics doesn't care about your fiscal quarter, Varick," I told him once. Gravity doesn't negotiate. He hated that. He hated anything he couldn't negotiate with. The breaking point began 6 months ago. For 6 months, I had flagged the concrete mixture. The timeline he had sold to the board was impossible. Concrete takes time to cure. It's a chemical reaction. If you rush it, it doesn't bond correctly. To meet his accelerated timeline, he had switched suppliers to a firm using rapid set compounds. This supplier promised they could pour and set a section in half the time of standard industrial concrete. Varick saw it as a miracle. I saw it as a death trap. My models showed that in high-wind scenarios, the rigidity would cause microscopic fractures. Standard concrete has a little give. It can flex. This rapid-set stuff was too brittle. It would be fine on a calm day, but the bridge was being built in a typhoon zone. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. The wind would hit it wrong. I tried to show him the simulations. He called them pessimistic algorithms. I remember walking into his office 3 weeks before the press conference. The air conditioning was set to a freezing temperature, and he was standing by the window, looking out at the construction site in the distance. "I need you to sign off on the Sector 4 pour," he said without turning around. "I can't do that, Varick," I said. I had a folder in my hand containing the core samples. I tried to show him the core samples. He turned then, a fake, tight smile plastered on his face. "Sloane, you're being difficult. The supplier is certified. The supplier manufactures patio foundations, Varick, not megastructures. Look at this." I placed a jagged chunk of gray rock on his pristine desk. "This is from the test pour. It looks solid, right? But look under the microscope. It's honeycombed. The heat from the rapid curing created air pockets." He picked up the rock, weighed it in his hand, and then dropped it into the trash can. He called them expensive paperweights. "We are pouring Sector 4 on Monday," he said, "with or without your signature. If you pour that concrete," I said, my voice trembling not from fear but from the sheer magnitude of his stupidity, "I will refuse to certify the safety rating. You won't get your occupancy permit." He looked at me then, and the fake smile vanished. In its place was something cold and reptilian. "You are an employee, Sloane. You are replaceable. The timeline is not." He needed me gone because I was the only person who refused to sign the safety certification for the new timeline. But he couldn't just fire me. I had tenure, and I had a reputation in the industry. If he fired me quietly, I would talk. I would write op-eds. I would go to the safety board. He needed to destroy me. That's why he invited me to the press conference. He told me we were going to announce a revised schedule. I thought, foolishly, that he had finally listened to reason. I thought he was going to announce a delay to allow for proper curing times. I walked into that auditorium with a sense of relief. I sat in the front row, ready to support him in doing the right thing. Then he started speaking. "We are not just building a bridge," he told the cameras. "We are building a testament to speed and efficiency. We are shattering the old ways of doing things." I felt a knot form in my stomach. This wasn't a delay announcement. "Some people," he said, his gaze drifting down to me, "some people are stuck in the past. They cling to old data like a security blanket." And then came the scream. The moment he decided to sacrifice my career on the altar of his ego. By screaming at me in public, he wasn't just firing me, he was discrediting me preemptively, so that if I went to the press, I'd look like a disgruntled employee he had already dressed down. It was a calculated assassination of my character. Walking out of that room was the hardest thing I have ever done. Every instinct in my body wanted to scream back, to jump on the stage and grab the microphone and explain the chemistry of hydration heat to the reporters. But I knew it wouldn't matter. He was the visionary. I was just the woman with the calculator who didn't believe in his dream. I walked out the side door, down the long concrete corridor of the stadium, and into the bright, blinding afternoon sun. I didn't have a car waiting. I took the subway home, surrounded by people who, I had no idea that the man on the news was planning to build them a tomb. That evening, I sat in my apartment, staring at the blank wall. My apartment was sparse. I didn't have much furniture, just books, models of trusses, and a drafting station. The silence in the room was absolute. I felt hollowed out. 3 years of my life, erased in 3 minutes of shouting. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. I looked at the screen. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't a recruiter. It was an unknown number. I considered throwing the phone across the room. I assumed it was a journalist looking for a quote, looking to get the disgruntled employee's side of the story so they could mock it. But it didn't stop buzzing. I picked it up. "What?" I snapped. "We saw the live stream," a voice said. Low, gravelly, older. I froze. The voice didn't sound like a journalist. It sounded like old money. It sounded like oak rooms and cigars and decisions that moved borders. "Who is this?" I asked. I represent the consortium, the voice said, and I have two others on the line. The consortium. My breath caught in my throat. In the world of heavy infrastructure, the consortium was a myth that turned out to be real. The consortium, the silent money, the group of institutional investors and sovereign funds that were actually financing the bridge. Most people think the government pays for these bridges. They don't. Not up front. Private equity groups front the cash, billions of dollars, and they get paid back over 30 years through tolls and government leases. They were the ones writing the billion-dollar checks that my VP was so eager to cash. They rarely spoke to anyone below the C-suite. They certainly never called mid-level engineers on their personal cell phones at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. He claims you're risk-averse, the second voice said. This voice was female, sharp, cutting. He claims his new timeline saves us $200 million in labor costs. I gripped the phone. Varric had already spun the narrative to them. He had framed his public outburst as a cost-saving measure. He's wrong, I said, my voice steady. I didn't stutter. I didn't apologize. The fear I had felt in the auditorium was gone, replaced by the cold clarity of facts. Explain, the first voice commanded. The rapid set compound creates heat pockets during the curing process, I said. The internal structure will honeycomb. It will hold for the ribbon cutting. But the first seasonal typhoon will turn that bridge into a pile of gravel in the bay. There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause where billions of dollars hang in the balance. Can you prove it? The third voice asked. I already did. He deleted the models from the central server this morning, but I remember the math. I closed my eyes, visualizing the equations. I could see the stress fractures propagating through the virtual concrete in my mind. I knew the load limits. I knew the shear coefficients. Varric could delete files, but he couldn't delete the laws of physics from my brain. We don't need the models, the first voice said. We need to know if you're willing to bet your career on that math. I laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. I just lost my career, I replied. I have nothing left to bet. Good, the voice said, because we aren't interested in stopping him. If we stop him now, the public loses faith in the project, the stock tanks, and we lose money. We need the project to finish. But we need to be insulated. My brow furrowed. What are you proposing? We want to hire you, not as an engineer, as the auditor. I lowered the phone from my ear for a second, staring at it. The auditor. It wasn't a role that existed on the org chart. What does the auditor do? I asked. The auditor, the gravelly voice said, decides who pays when the bridge falls down. The next 2 weeks were a blur of lawyers and non-disclosure. Agreements. I didn't go to a competitor. I didn't go to the press. I went dark. I sat in a conference room in a building that didn't have a name on the door, reading contracts that were thicker than the phone book. The consortium was serious. They knew Varric was a liability, but they were trapped. They couldn't fire him without spooking the market. They needed the bridge to open to start recouping their investment. But they also knew I was right. They knew the concrete was flawed. They were hedge funds. They hedged. They were betting on the bridge opening, but they were also betting on it failing, and they wanted me to be the one to manage the failure. Meanwhile, my former VP was taking a victory lap. I watched him on the financial news channels. He looked radiant. With me out of the way, he bullied the junior team into signing off on the rapid timeline. He fired 2 other engineers who asked questions and replaced them with interns who were just happy to have a job. The stock price soared. He gave interviews about trimming the fat and removing obstacles to innovation. He was the darling of the industry, the man who could build faster than anyone else. He called me an obstacle. He told a magazine that I was stuck in the 20th century. He thought he had won. He thought I was at home licking my wounds, humiliated and blacklisted. He had no idea that I was sitting in an office 3 blocks away, reviewing his insurance policies. He had no idea that the people he was trying to impress had given me the keys to his destruction. The tension wasn't in what was happening, but in what was about to happen. The project was moving into the final phase, the insurance bind. This is the part of construction nobody talks about. For a project of this magnitude to open, it requires a catastrophic liability policy. It's not like car insurance. This is a policy that covers billions in damages. Without that insurance certificate, the government won't allow a single car to cross. Usually, this is a rubber stamp process. The insurance companies look at the safety certs, trust the VP, and sign the paper. Varric was expecting a rubber stamp. He was expecting a low premium. He had already spent the money he saved on the concrete. 2 weeks to the day after the press conference, the announcement went out. It wasn't a press release. It didn't go to the public. It was a direct memo from the consortium to the VP's office. I wasn't there to see his face, but I know the color drained from it. The memo stated that, due to volatility in global construction markets, the consortium had created a new, independent subsidiary to handle all risk assessment and insurance underwriting for their mega projects. It sounded boring. It sounded bureaucratic. It sounded like something Varick would skim over while drinking his morning espresso, until he read the bottom line. The memo introduced the new Director of Liability Assessment. Me. I can only imagine the sound he made when he saw my name, typed in bold letters at the bottom of the page. The woman he had humiliated. The woman he had called a calculator. The woman he had screamed at in front of the world. The man who had screamed at me for questioning his strategy now had to apply to me for the permission to open his bridge. I sat in my new office. It was glass-walled, overlooking the city. I wasn't wearing a hard hat and a safety vest anymore. I was wearing a tailored blazer. My desk was empty, except for a single pen and a stack of actuarial tables. I waited. I knew he would come. He had to. He couldn't open the bridge without my signature on the insurance bind. And he couldn't go around me because the consortium, his bosses, had given me absolute authority. He came to my new office 3 days later. He didn't scream this time. He looked small. He stood in the doorway, hesitating. It was the first time I had ever seen him hesitate. He wore a suit that seemed too expensive for the sweat stains forming on the collar. "Sloane," he said. His voice was tight, controlled. "Director," I corrected him, not looking up from my paperwork. He flinched. He walked in and sat down without being invited. He sat down. I didn't offer him water. I simply slid a single document across the desk. "This is the new policy," I said softly. He picked it up, his hands trembling. He scanned the pages. I watched his eyes dart back and forth. I saw the moment the numbers hit him. I saw his jaw drop. This premium is insane," he stammered. "It's 400% higher than our budget. It wipes out the entire profit margin. It wipes out my bonus." I leaned back in my chair. I crossed my legs. I looked him in the eye, remembering the spit flying from his mouth 2 weeks ago. "That's the high-velocity curing surcharge," I explained, leaning back. "Since you are so confident in your physics-defying strategy, I calculated the actuarial risk based on the honeycomb fractures I warned you about." "You can't do this," he whispered. The arrogance was gone. He was just a man realizing he was standing on a trapdoor. "You're just doing this to get back at me." "No," I said. "I'm doing this to protect the investors. But there is a clause." "A clause?" Hope flickered in his eyes. He thought I was offering him a way out. He thought I was going to ask for an apology or a raise. He didn't understand. I didn't want his money. I wanted his soul. I pointed to the bottom of page 4, the confidence clause. I read aloud. "If the lead project manager, that's you, agrees to personally indemnify the deductible and agrees to a daily structural review conducted by my office for the next 10 years, we will lower the premium to standard rates." He stared at me. "Personally indemnify? You want me to put up my own assets? My stock options? My house? If your strategy is as sound as you screamed it was," I said, "then there's zero risk, right? You told the press I was peddling fear. If I'm wrong, you pay nothing. You keep your bonus. You keep your reputation. You just have to sign your name next to your belief." The room was absolutely still. The air conditioner hummed. He looked at the paper, then at me, then out the window at the bridge in the distance. The bridge he had built on a foundation of lies and quick-drying cement. "You're crazy," he said. "I'm a calculator," I replied. "Remember?" I uncapped a pen and set it down. It clicked loud in the quiet room. "Sign it, or the bridge stays closed, the investors sue you for gross negligence, and you go to prison for fraud." He stared at the pen. It was a simple, black ballpoint, the kind you buy in bulk for an office supply closet. Yet it sat on the glass surface like a loaded gun. "You're bluffing," Varick said. His voice was no longer the booming baritone that had commanded the press conference. It was thin, reedy, scraping against his throat. "The consortium would never allow this. They need me. I'm the face of the project. The consortium needs the bridge. I corrected him, keeping my posture rigid. You are just the contractor. And right now, you are a contractor with a liability profile that makes you radioactive. They don't care if you sign this or if I refuse the insurance bind and shut the site down today. Either way, their risk is managed. If you sign, the risk is yours. If you don't, the project stops, and the inquiry into your concrete procurement begins. I saw the calculation happen behind his eyes. He was running the numbers, just as I knew he would. He was a gambler. He had bet his entire reputation on this accelerated timeline. If the bridge stopped now, the investigation would reveal the rapid set concrete. It would reveal the ignored safety protocols. He would be blackballed from the industry by sunset. He would lose the bonus, the future contracts, the fame. But if he signed, he kept the illusion alive. He kept the bonus. He kept the glory. All he had to do was be right. All he had to do was trust his own lie. It's a standard indemnity clause, Varick, I said, my voice devoid of any taunt. You said the physics works for you. If you truly believe that, this document costs you nothing. It's just ink. He reached for the pen. His wrist locked. I watched the tendons strain against the cuff of his Italian shirt. He was fighting his own survival instinct. His gut knew I was right. His gut remembered the honeycomb fractures in the core samples I had shown him. But his greed was louder than his gut. He gripped the pen. He didn't look at me. He scribbled his signature on the line, marked primary indemnifier. The sound of the tip scratching against the paper was abrasive, like a stone dragging across a chalkboard. He shoved the paper back toward me. There, he spat. Are you happy? You got your pound of flesh. I don't want flesh, Varick. I said, picking up the document and sliding it into a folder. I want structural integrity. You have your insurance bind. The site can remain open. He stood up, smoothing his jacket, trying to regain the height he had lost in the chair. When this bridge opens, he hissed, leaning over the desk. And when it stands for 100 years, I am going to make sure everyone knows you tried to sabotage it. I will sue you for professional malpractice. I look forward to the data, I said. He stormed out. The glass door didn't slam because it was on a hydraulic hinge, so he just had to walk away aggressively, while the door slowly, softly, clicked shut behind him. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I simply opened my laptop and initiated the confidence protocol. The next 6 months were a study in human erosion. The bridge construction finished on the accelerated schedule. Varick pushed the crews to the breaking point. They poured concrete at night. They installed cables in the rain. He was manic. I saw him on the site feeds, pacing the catwalks, screaming at foremen, checking the curing logs himself. He wasn't checking for quality anymore. He was checking for his life. Every Friday, he received a bill from my office. The premium was standard, as promised, but there was a line item for independent structural monitoring. I had installed sensors, strain gauges, accelerometers, acoustic emission sensors on every critical joint and span of the bridge. Varick had to pay for the installation. He had to pay for the bandwidth. He had to pay for the servers that stored the data. He tried to fight the invoices. He called the consortium to complain that I was bleeding the budget. They told him to take it up with the director of liability assessment. He stopped calling. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was scheduled for a Tuesday in November. The timing was deliberate. He wanted the bridge open before the holiday traffic rush to maximize the toll revenue numbers. For the Q4 report, I received an invitation. I didn't go. Instead, I watched the live stream from my office. The day was overcast. The wind was blowing in from the ocean, whipping the flags on the podium. Varick stood there, surrounded by politicians and investors. He looked thinner than he had 6 months ago. His suit hung slightly loose on his frame. His tan looked artificial, like he had sprayed it on to hide the gray undertone of his skin. Today, Varick shouted into the microphone, fighting the wind. We proved that bold vision conquers all obstacles. They told us it couldn't be done in this time frame. They told us we had to wait. But we didn't wait. We built. The crowd cheered. The politicians clapped, eager to associate themselves with a success. I zoomed in on the video feed. I wasn't looking at Varick. I was looking at the suspension cables behind him. The wind was gusting at 30 miles per hour. The bridge deck was designed to aerodynamic standards. It should have been cutting through the air, but I saw a vibration. It was tiny, imperceptible to the naked eye, perhaps, but I had the sensor data running on a second monitor. The graph spiked. The deck was twisting, just a fraction of a degree, fighting the rigidity of the rapid-set concrete. Varric must have felt it. On the screen, he paused mid-sentence. His hand gripped the podium. He looked down at his feet. For a split second, the terror broke through his mask. He thought it was happening right then. He thought the ground was opening up to swallow him on live television. The vibration passed. The truck that had caused the harmonic resonance moved on. The bridge settled. Varric resumed speaking, but his voice was higher, faster. He wanted to get off the stage. He wanted to get off the bridge. He cut the ribbon. The cameras flashed. He smiled, but it was a rictus of panic. He was the captain of a ship he knew was made of paper, and he had just launched it into a hurricane. The bridge opened to traffic at midnight. The first cars rolled across. The tolls started collecting. The next morning, Varric's bonus hit his account. It was a staggering amount of money, enough to retire, enough to disappear. And he tried. He bought the beach house in the Maldives. He bought a McLaren. He bought a place in the city with a private elevator. He spent money with a frantic energy, as if he needed to convert the digital numbers in his bank account into physical objects before they vanished. But he couldn't leave. The confidence clause required him to remain as the lead project manager for the duration of the warranty period, 10 years. If he quit, the indemnity clause triggered immediately, and the full deductible would be seized from his assets to cover the risk of his absence. He was trapped. He had the money, but he had to show up to work every single day to watch the thing that terrified him. My office became his probation officer. Every morning at 8 a.m., automated email went from my server to his inbox. Subject: Daily Structural Integrity Report. Sector 4. I knew Sector 4 was the weak point. That was where the rapid-set concrete had been poured during the highest humidity window. That was where the honeycomb fractures would start. The emails were usually short. Status: stable. Micro-deflection: 0.002 millimeters. Within tolerance: acoustic emissions. Nominal. Please acknowledge receipt. He had to reply. That was part of the agreement. He had to type received and hit send. Every single morning. For the first month, he replied instantly. Received. By the second month, he started delaying. He would reply at 10 a.m. Then, noon. He was testing the leash. One day, he didn't reply by 2 p.m. I didn't call him. I sent a courier to his office with a physical letter. The courier walked into his glass-walled VP suite, interrupted his meeting with a potential new client, and handed him a red envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Notice of breach of confidence clause. Warning 1 of 3. Failure to acknowledge structural data implies negligence. Asset forfeiture protocols on standby. He replied to the email 3 minutes after the courier left. He never missed a morning again. The psychological toll began to manifest physically. I saw him at an industry gala in December. He was drinking heavily. He wasn't mingling with the titans of industry anymore. He was standing near the exit, checking his phone. He looked at the weather app. I knew he did, because I checked the weather app too. It was typhoon season. The storms in this region are not polite. They are violent, churning masses of low pressure that slam into the coast with the force of a demolition crew. The bridge was built to withstand a Category 5, on paper, but the bridge on paper was built with cured concrete. The bridge in the bay was built with Varric's ego. The first test came in January. A tropical depression formed off the coast. It wasn't a full typhoon, but the winds were gusting to 60 miles per hour. I stayed in my office that night. I had the sensor array visualized on a 3D map of the bridge on my wall monitor. Varric was in his office too. I could see his login on the network. He was refreshing the dashboard every 10 seconds. The wind hit the bridge at 11 p.m. The sensors lit up, green to yellow. Sector 4, lateral load, 75% capacity. The concrete was rigid, too rigid. It wasn't swaying with the wind. It was resisting it. Energy has to go somewhere. If the material doesn't flex, it cracks. I watched the acoustic sensors. These microphones listen for the sound of snapping, not big snaps. The sound of microscopic crystals breaking inside the rock. Pop, pop. The data scrolled on my screen. Acoustic event detected. Sector 4, Pylon B. It wasn't a failure. It was a warning. The bridge was screaming, but only I could hear it. And Varric, he had the dashboard too. I dialed his extension. He picked up, On the first ring. He didn't say hello. All I heard was his breathing. Rapid, shallow, terrified. Director, I said. Is it? His voice cracked. Is it failing? Not yet, I said calmly. The wind is shifting. The load is distributing. But the acoustic emissions in Sector 4 are elevated. The honeycomb is compressing. What do we do? He asked. Do we close it? Do we shut down the traffic? If you close it, I said, you trigger the loss of revenue clause in your indemnity agreement. You have to pay the tolls out of pocket for every hour the bridge is closed without a structural failure confirmation. But if I don't close it and it falls, then you go to prison for manslaughter. I finished the sentence for him. It's a difficult choice, Varick. The visionary choice. What does your gut say? He didn't answer. He hung up. He didn't close the bridge. He gambled. He sat in his office and prayed to a god he didn't believe in, that the wind would die down. The wind died. Down at 4 a.m. The bridge held. The sensors went back to green. Varick sent me an email at 4:05 a.m. Subject, status body. It held. You were wrong. The concrete held. He was trying to convince himself. He was trying to reclaim the victory. He thought he had passed the test. He thought the worst was over. He didn't understand fatigue. Materials don't always fail on the first hit. They fail on the 1,000th. Every gust of wind, every heavy truck, every thermal expansion cycle was creating micro-damage. The cracks were there now. They were microscopic, spider-webbing through the rapid set compound, invisible to the eye but fatal to the structure. He spent February in a state of manic denial. He convinced himself that the storm proved his brilliance. He started spending money again. He bought a yacht. He named it the Velocity. He walked around the office with his chest puffed out. He started making jokes about me to the junior staff again. She worries too much, he'd say. She doesn't understand modern materials. I let him talk. I let him buy the yacht. I let him think he had escaped. Because I knew the data. I saw the trend lines. The acoustic events weren't stopping. Even on calm days, the sensors in Sector 4 were picking up noise. Pop, pop, pop. The bridge was crying out in pain. 24 hours a day. The internal structure was delaminating. The rebar was separating from the concrete because the bond was never strong enough. It was a slow-motion car crash, and Varick was in the driver's seat, wearing a blindfold. Then came March, the 3-month mark. The warranty period for the settling phase was ending. If the bridge passed this milestone without a reported defect, the insurance premium would drop slightly. Varick was counting the days. On the morning of March 14th, I arrived at my office early. The sun was rising over the bay, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. It was a beautiful day. No wind, clear skies. I sat down, at my desk with my coffee. I opened the dashboard, and there it was. It wasn't a yellow warning light this time. It was a red notification, blinking silently in the center of the screen. Critical alert. Sector 4, continuity loss detected. Sensor array B, 12, crack width, 3.5 millimeters. Propagation rate, active A, 3.5 millimeters crack is not a microfissure. A 3.5 millimeters crack is a wound. It meant the concrete had finally given up the ghost. The tension from the suspension cable had pulled the pylon apart just enough to let the air in. And where air goes, moisture follows. And where moisture goes, corrosion begins. The clock had run out. I didn't call the emergency services yet. The bridge wasn't going to fall today. It would stand for weeks, maybe months, with that crack. But it was no longer safe. It was compromised. I picked up the phone. I didn't call Varick's office line. I called his cell. He answered from his car. I could hear the engine of his McLaren purring. He was probably driving to the site feeling like a king. Varick, I said. Sloane. He sounded cheerful. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Low wind. Perfect visibility. Pull over, I said. Excuse me? Pull your car over, Varick. You're driving a devastatingly expensive asset, and you're going to need both hands on the wheel to navigate what comes next. What are you talking about? The irritation was back. I have a ribbon cutting for the Phase 2 access road in an hour. You don't have a ribbon cutting? I said. You have a claim. A claim? What claim? Sensor B12, I said. Sector 4. We have a confirmed fissure, 3.5 millimeters and widening. The confidence clause has been triggered. There was a long silence. I heard the car engine rev down. I heard the tires crunch on gravel. No, he whispered. That's impossible. It's a glitch. It's a sensor error. I've already verified it with the secondary array, I said. It's not a glitch. It's the physics you tried to ignore. The bridge is failing, Varric. And you just bought it. We are approaching the moment where the bill comes due. Varric is sitting on the side of the road in a car he can no longer afford, staring at a bridge that is about to consume his entire life. If you want to be there when the trap snaps shut and the confidence clause takes everything he owns, make sure you're following along. You won't want to miss the end of this transaction. You can't do this, Varric stammered into the phone. The arrogance that had defined him for 2 years was dissolving, replaced by the raw, unvarnished panic of a man watching his parachute fail to open. I'll call the maintenance crew. We'll patch it. A little epoxy injection. No one has to know. We don't need to involve the insurance. That is the fraud I warned you about, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm, but it tasted like victory. The sensor data is already logged on the blockchain server. The consortium sees it. The underwriters see it. And as of 10 seconds ago, your bank sees it. My bank? Check your accounts, Varric. I didn't hang up. I wanted to hear it. I heard the rustle of fabric as he fumbled for his other phone. I heard the tapping of his thumb against the screen. Then, a silence that was heavier than concrete. Access denied, he whispered. Why does it say access denied? Because the deductible on a catastrophic structural defect claim for a project of this size is $150 million, I explained. Per the terms of the confidence clause you signed, your assets are the primary collateral. We froze them to prevent capital flight. You froze everything? His voice rose to a shriek. My checking account? My portfolio? I can't even buy gas to get back to the office. Then, walk, I said. It's a nice day for it. You can inspect the cracks on your way. I ended the call. He didn't walk. He ran. He abandoned the McLaren on the shoulder of the access road, a symbol of the life he used to have, and sprinted the mile back to the site office. When he burst into my office 20 minutes later, he looked like a man who had survived a shipwreck. His tie was gone. His shirt was soaked through. His eyes were wild. He didn't scream this time. He fell into the chair opposite my desk, gasping for air. Fix it, he wheezed. Sloane, please. I'm begging you. Undo the trigger. I'll give you anything. I'll give you half the bonus. I'll resign. Just don't take everything. I looked at him. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel hate. I felt the cold satisfaction of an equation balancing out. I can't undo it, I said. The machine is in motion. The crack exists. The physics doesn't care about your bank account, Varric. It only cares about the load. But I'm ruined. He put his head in his hands. The repairs, the retrofitting, it will cost millions. Yes, I said. And every penny will come from your estate until the deductible is met. That was the deal. You bet on your strategy. You lost. The legal dismantling of Varric's life was efficient and terrifyingly bureaucratic. The consortium didn't send goons. They sent auditors. They arrived the next morning. They occupied his office. They didn't fire him. As I said, that would have been too easy. Firing him would have severed his liability. To keep the confidence clause active, he had to remain the lead project manager. He had to remain the responsible party. So, he stayed. But his life was stripped away, layer by layer. First, the liquidity went. The bonus he had received, the millions he had gloated about, was clawed back instantly to an escrow account designated for emergency structural remediation. Then, the physical assets. The beach house in the Maldives was listed for sale by the consortium's real estate arm before Varric even had a chance to pack his swim trunks. The yacht, the Velocity, was seized at the marina. His city apartment, his collection of vintage watches, his imported furniture, all of it was tagged, cataloged, and liquidated. He was allowed to keep a small stipend for living expenses. It was calculated based on the median income of a junior construction laborer. The man who had worn $5,000 suits was now shopping at discount outlets. The man who had ordered the accelerated timeline to save money was now paying for the consequences with his own future. But the true punishment wasn't the poverty. It was the work, because the bridge was still open. It wasn't falling down today. The crack in Sector 4 was managed. We installed temporary bracing. We injected industrial epoxies. We lowered the speed limit. The bridge could operate, but it was on life support. And Varric was the nurse. Every morning, He drives to the site in a 10-year-old sedan he bought with his stipend. He walks into his office, which is no longer the glass corner suite, but a portable trailer near the maintenance yard, and opens the report from my office. He has to review the stress logs. He has to approve the work orders for the repairs. Last week, we had to replace a section of the cabling in Sector 4 because the concrete anchor was crumbling. The cost was $300,000. Varick sat at his metal desk, staring at the invoice. He knew that money wasn't coming from a corporate budget. It was coming from the sale of his stock portfolio. He was signing away his retirement, signature by signature. I went to see him yesterday. It's been 6 months since the crack appeared. He looks 20 years older. His hair is thinning. The tan is long gone, replaced by the pallor of a man who doesn't sleep. He was staring at a monitor, watching the live feed of the Sector 4 repair crew. "Director," he said, without turning around. He calls me director now, never Sloane. "Mr. Varick," I replied, "the acoustic emissions in Sector 5 are rising. We need to schedule a core sample test." He flinched. "Sector 5, another potential failure point. Another $1 million of repairs. Can it wait?" he asked, his voice raspy. "Can it wait until next quarter? The sale of the beach house hasn't cleared escrow yet. I don't have the liquidity." "Physics doesn't wait for escrow, Varick," I said. He closed his eyes. He let out a long, shuddering breath. Then he picked up his pen. "Schedule the test," he said. "And the sensors?" I asked. "We need to upgrade the array. The old ones are corroding." "How much?" $50,000. He nodded. He signed the authorization. He didn't even argue. He was defeated. He was a hollow shell of a man, kept upright only by the obligation to pay for his sins. I turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "You know," I said, "you could have just listened to me. You could have waited the extra 12 months. You could have let the concrete cure." He laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. "I wanted to be a visionary," he whispered. "I wanted to leave a mark." "You did," I said. "You left a crack." I walked back to my office. The sun was setting over the bridge. It looked beautiful from a distance. The lights were twinkling on the cables. The cars were streaming across, commuters going home to their families, oblivious to the drama playing out in the trailer below. They didn't know that the bridge was standing on a foundation of greed and retribution. They didn't know that every time they paid a toll, a man lost a piece of his soul. They were safe because I was watching, and they were safe because Varick was paying. He is trapped there. The warranty period is 10 years. He has 9 years and 6 months left. He will spend the next decade watching that bridge, fearing every storm, dreading every report I send him. He is a prisoner in a jail without bars, a captive of his own confidence clause. He wanted to defy the laws of nature for a quick profit. He thought he could bully reality into submission. But reality always wins. Gravity always collects its debt. I stood at the window, watching the first stars appear above the suspension towers. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was just balanced. The stress was equal to the resistance. The scream that had slammed into me in that auditorium felt like a lifetime ago. The humiliation had burned. Yes, but fire cleanses. It had burned away my timidity. It had burned away my hesitation. It had forged me into something harder than concrete. I am not just an engineer anymore. I am the auditor. And I will be here every single day, ensuring that the math holds, and that the man who questioned it pays the price. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed seeing justice served in the most calculated way possible, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a boss who refused to listen to reason? How did it end? I read every single comment. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about people getting exactly what they deserve. Until next time.